today's forum on national events. So far, we've got about 30 people who are on the call, and I'm sure that we'll have a few more who join as well. So we've just got the three of us here today that'll be answering your questions and queries, and we'll be presenting. Myself, Jamie Parsons, I'm the CEO at Badminton Australia. We've also got Andrew O'Loughlin, who's been helping us through the process as an independent person, providing his expertise and assistance from an industry point of view, and Matt Simpson as well, who's also on the line, who'll answer any questions that he can through the chat function as well. So Andrew, we might get started, and I'll hand over to you from here.
Thanks, Jamie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for investing your valuable time in this session today. We've got a little bit to get through, so we will go through things reasonably quickly, but feel free to raise any questions in the Q&A box or the chat as we go. And we'll certainly look to come to those towards the end of the session. But thank you very much for joining us. Jamie, if you'd like to flick through to the next slide, please, that'd be great. As Jamie mentioned, the event review process has been something that's been going on for many months now, and many of you have contributed, which has been fantastic and very valuable to have insights from various people. The process has really been in two parts, which we'll cover off today. Firstly, we looked at the national event structure, and then secondly, more specifically, the formats for the national events. So we'll take you through the two distinct sort of outcomes from those parts of the process today. If you want to keep flicking through the slides, Jamie, I'll take everyone through the inputs that we received, the representation we received from across the badminton community. We obviously had a number of forums, both one-to-one discussions with representatives from across the states and territories and across the badminton community, and had a lot of great input from the event review working group, which I think a number of you who are here today sat on and contributed to. We also had a number of other forums which we were able to discuss some of the options that were available to us. We obviously also surveyed the badminton community, and again, there's some great data and insights which came from that, and some great discussions from all the important people within the badminton community. So that's, I guess, where we've taken a lot of the information from and put into this process. If you want to flick through to the next one. Thanks, Jamie. I guess, as we always should with the process and making decisions, we had four clear principles which were established by Badminton Australia, by the board, to guide us throughout this process. And you can see those there, but naturally it's been about promoting the sport as best we can, celebrating badminton and what it has to offer, aligning to high performance pathways within the sport, and also, of course, making sure the plans that we put in place will be financially sustainable and put us in a good place for the future. And then supporting that, we also added in another three elements. Just on the next slide, please. Matt, yeah, the first one that we added in around those four principles to make sure we had some, I guess, broad and relevant criteria to look at everything through, making sure that the national events were fit for, obviously, next year and the years to come, and making sure that they were going to meet the needs of the sport and the various people involved in the sport now, but also in the future. The fourth one there, beneath promoting the sport and celebrating badminton, want to really make sure that the events that we're providing are meaningful for everyone, for participants, coaches, officials, volunteers, anyone who's involved in the events, making sure they actually play a role and serve a purpose for people involved in the sport. And then lastly, we added in under the high performance and financial elements, making sure that we setting these events up to be achievable and manageable for those that are involved in planning and delivering them. So they were the 7 criteria we've had in mind as we've looked at these 2 parts in terms of the structure and then the format, making sure we've got some good criteria to make decisions. Obviously, there's different decisions that can be made, but it's good to have an understanding of what the criteria are as we go through those. So many of you would have seen those before, but we wanted to make sure we had those front of mind as we go through the outputs that we're about to go through. Jamie, if you wanted to go through, the next slide really goes down into, I suppose, into the next level when we looked at and discussed with a number of people, what's the purpose of the national events? And I guess we've got those principles and criteria for making decisions and designing these events for the future. But as you can see there was a number of objectives or reasons, aims that we wanted to achieve with the national events. I'll go through those very quickly. And what you can see is there's some slight differences between individual events and teams events, and perhaps some of the new or endorsed events that might come on in future years. But if you can't read those very well, it's really defined as competing for national championships as a purpose of a national event, naturally promoting the sport and the traditions of the sport, offering development to coaches and officials alongside the players and athletes, making sure events provide an aspirational asset for the sport, so it's something that people aspire to attend and be involved in, making sure that we're satisfying people's involvement with those events and that it helps promote the sport. And then particularly for the individual events, they obviously serve a purpose about being for pathway development, selection for national programs, and also the ability to generate resources and revenue for the sport as well. So that's the rationale or the criteria for what we're about to go through now in terms of where we're heading in terms of the structure and the format for the national events. And Matt, I'm not sure if you're able to be heard. I'm happy to keep going through these slides.
It'll be me, Andrew.
Yep,
we'll be going through these. So thanks very much, Andrew. So as you can see, everyone, from the information that Andrew has presented, we've gone through a really robust and thorough decision-making process, drawing in lots of information, data, feedback, ideas, and through the working group to really come up with what we think is the best, both from a structure point of view, so the types of events we run at a national level, but also the format of those. So all of that information went through the staff at Badminton Australia, myself, and Matt Simpson, who's the events person. And then we also had a working group of about 7 people from all around Australia that also provided input and sorted through all that data to come up with the recommendations that we're going to show you now. So these recommendations are not recommendations that are set in stone. These are still draft recommendations, but we're now at the very pointy end after going through that quite extensive process to be able to get to the point where we are now, which is getting very close now to the final recommendations. After we finalize these final recommendations and the board approves them, we'll then turn those recommendations into bylaws. So that'll be the final step is the setting up of the bylaws. So now as we go through this, if you do want to ask any questions, we've got Matt Simpson on the chat ready to answer anything, but we'll also answer anything that comes up as well. And we also did have some questions. A few people sent through questions from Matt Simpson's email that said, if there's any questions you want to ask up front, please ask away. And hopefully we'll cover all of those in this next phase of the presentation as well. And if we don't cover them, please ask a question in the chat function as well. If you don't quite understand what we're asking, you can always contact any of us after the meeting as well, or after the presentation, after this forum as well, and we can talk to you directly one-on-one too. So let's start off with how we've come up with the structure, the guiding principles, and the evaluation criteria that Andrew spoke about before. We then applied all of those aboves to what would be the best event structure, and we looked at various options as well. So the structure includes things like the calendar positioning, the layout of the events, and what levels of competitions. We have surveys and interviews, working group analysis, and then we developed up a range of options to get to this final point where we are now. When we did the survey, some of the insights that came out of the surveys and the one-on-one interviews, there's a whole lot of insights we had. We'll go through some of those in a bit more detail shortly as well. But around 95% of respondents rated national events as somewhat important or very important, but at least a minimum of important. So there's a really high level of value that the badminton community places on the national events. And then the overall experience and enjoyment was important for continued involvement as well. While there was overwhelming support for having a national championships, there was quite a number of people that were very supportive of change into the future. More than half of people want to change. There was around 25% of people that were nonplussed about whether there was change or kept the same, and there was around 20% of people that were happy with the existing arrangements. And 47%, another insight that came out of that, it's 47% of the people who replied to the survey said there weren't actually enough events, and that's something that's come through our high performance review as well, about our talented player pathway, with players being able to participate in more events. There was also really strong support for combining events, so creating a better event experience, and that also has a flow-on effect of making events more financially sustainable, and also having events at multiple years. There was support for having events for multiple years at a particular city or location, and then moving it every 2 or 3 or 4 years, as opposed to having a different event in a different location every year. And also there was strong support for having a festival of badminton type concept, where there was multiple championships being run at the same time. You can see that was about 66% of people were in favour of that. So we came up with 4 options. Option 1 was no change whatsoever. And then option 4 was putting every event into one massive festival of badminton every year. So that would be Opens, under 19s, under 17s, under 15s, and the new under 13s, and having them all together, potentially with other events. So that was the range, and where we've come up with is probably somewhere in the middle. So we're really looking at combined events. When I go through the calendar with you shortly, combined events being held 3 times during the course of the year, and then also a series of individual participation events, such as there could be a national masters championships, a national country championships, a national LGBTIQ championships running as participation events. But then we have the performance events, which are the Open 19s, 17s and 15s. And then also an under 13s as well. So here is just the draft calendar. We've sent this out a number of times to the states, and I think we're nearly almost getting very close to announcing this formally. But again, we're just looking for final feedback if there's anything in there that we might have missed. So this is the first 5 months or so of the year, and you can see at the top there in January, what we're proposing is the first combined set of events. So the National Open Championships, both team and individual, still running back to back together. The National Open Championships running in January. Now, the reason we need to have the championships running in January and not any other time of year is because then that allows our highest level players to be able to play. They won't be overseas, playing in overseas competitions or representing Australia overseas. It also ties in neatly with the Oceania Championships flowing on from there in terms of selection. And then it also provides the opportunity for then players to be selected again into Thomas and Uber Cups and Sudirman Cup that normally happens in the first half of the year. So, there's a few different options we looked at in terms of when the Open Championships should be, but the best time we've been able to find them is in that January period of time. so this is in a perfect world. So we're presenting this to you in the perfect world. As you all know, we don't live in a perfect world at the moment. So for 2022, we've also, as a backup plan, planned for the April school holidays as backup dates for 2022 if we can't run the event in January because too many states are locked down. So just be mindful of that for year 2022. But in the ideal world, 22, 23, 24, we will be running those events in January. The other reason for running the events around those dates in January is to avoid a crossover as much as possible, or to make sure that we're having the events in school holidays. So with so many people around Australia missing school, face-to-face schooling, is that we think that school holidays is the best time to have that as well, which is why we've put them in the dates that they have, because every state in Australia has that as a school holiday period. So let's move on to months of June through to October. So in July, we're looking at combining the 15s and 19s together, where at the moment we've got two options, because in the school holiday periods around Australia, they do not cross over. They're a separate 2 weeks. There's 4 weeks of school holidays, 2 weeks for one set of states, 2 weeks for another set of states. So we're getting also close, subject to all of this going through, is identifying where in Australia these events will be held. And we've looked at, in terms of considering option 1 and option 2, we've looked at three different variations. One is so that students don't miss too much school, that we could either hold the event over both sets of school holidays, so all students miss some school in those age groups. Another option is every alternate year we hold it 1 year in one set of holidays and the next year in another set of holidays, so again to share it. And the third option is that wherever the host state is, that we will hold it in the school holiday dates of the host state. So what we're leaning towards at the moment is that we will hold it in the third option, which is in the dates that each state is hosting in their school holiday dates, is what we're thinking might be the best option at the moment. We then obviously are running into Commonwealth Games, which is also an important reason why we would want to hold the Open Championships in January, because it gives us a good lead into selection for athletes for Commonwealth Games as well. Then when we move into September, again, we're looking at under 17s and under 13s being held in that period of time. The under 17s, it could be 2 options, again, because the school holidays goes across a 4-week period. So we want to try and choose the best dates, as we want to do with the 15s and 19s. And you can see there, we've also got some other proposed events that we would like to potentially run. So a national club championships where people can enter team as a club, but also looking at holding potentially just before that period of time an all schools national championships as well. So it may be possible that we can do all of that in the first year, but it may be that we don't want to bite off too much that we can chew in the first year. We want to give people a really good experience. Maybe we can't do all of those events in the first year, but we'll look to add them in future years. But what we will be running in September is under 17s and under 13s. The format of under 13s, we hold off finalising any of that at the moment until we've finalised the formats of the Open 19s, 17s and 15s. But you can see that the under 13s is a shorter period, mainly around child safety, child health and well-being, that it is better to have a shorter period of time for 11 and 12-year-olds in terms of travelling away from home for such a long period of time. So if I just move on to the end of the year, so November and December, there's a few major international events on: the World Junior Championships, as well as Australian Badminton Open, and there's also potentially an Oceania International Para Championships as well. So we're just waiting for confirmation from the BWF about when all those events will be. None of that's confirmed. It's all optional. It's all to be confirmed, which is also a little bit frustrating from trying to organise our calendars because we don't know what's happening at international level. And then also that's really important for states as well, obviously, because states and clubs then organise their events often around when the national events will be made. So I've got to the end. I've just noticed there's a couple of questions that have come through on the Q&A, and I'll see if I can just answer them now quickly before I move on to the next section. But if you do have a question, anyone around the calendars, this is a good time to get onto the chat now and ask around the calendar before we get into the format. But just from Nigel, we've got a question. When will a decision be made about 15's and 19's event? Why are we not using the term 1 holiday window? So I think, Nigel, I think you're referring to 2022, I think. The reason for not using the period for term 1, which I think you mean is Easter school holidays, is because one of the things we found, one of the insights we gained was that states need a bit of time to be able to select their junior teams to compete at a national level. So trying to hold those events at Easter doesn't quite give state and territory organisations the best opportunity to select their teams. There's also a question around why Para Championships being brought forward to January. So the reason for having Para is that we don't want Para to be run as a separate event. We would like Para to be part of one of the combined championships, and it's just a matter of trying to work out when is the best time during the year and what events is best to line it up with. And so at the moment, we're suggesting that the end of January is the best time throughout the year to do that. But good question about that, because it's something we've been balancing up as well. And there's also a question about December event being cancelled. Don't want to spend too much time on that, but we will make it a decision about the December event by the end of October this year, so everyone's aware of whether or not it will go ahead. And a little bit of that has to do with whether states got their borders locked down or not. So Nigel, not sure what state you're from, but you can probably bet your bottom dollar Western Australia is going to have their borders closed until after Christmas, and potentially Queensland, Tasmania and South Australia as well. So we'll need to consider that when we're making a decision at the end of October around December. So TJ has asked a question of, do we see any challenges with hosting open nationals in January from an entry perspective? Lots of players would play in this event, may not be able to play. Yes, you're right. Again, TJ, about that, I guess we've tried to make sure that we can line up the event, the open event, to make sure the best players in Australia can play in that event, and that it also lines up with selection for BWF national teams. So that's, as I mentioned before, lining up with Oceania championships, which then is a qualification into Thomason Hoover Cup or Suderman Cup each year. So and also we wanted to make sure that we had it in school holidays, because many of the people who participate in the open event are school students. We didn't want them to be missing too much school. So that's the thinking around that. It's just balancing up all the different options to what works best. So that's why we've had the draft come through as January at the moment. I've got a question about under 13s. We run by Badminton Australia and not WSBA. So I think some of you might be familiar. Western Suburbs Badminton Association runs an under 13 event. That event is held in January. We're not involved in that event. If WSBA wishes to continue running an event, we very much supportive of that. But the event that we're holding in under 13s will be what is suitable for under 13s from a health and wellbeing point of view, what's suitable for player pathway development, and what's suitable for coach and umpire development as well. So it's likely that it won't be run potentially in the same way that WSBA runs their event at the moment. So it is a separate event. It is not something that we're planning to take over. So I think TJ's asking us a question about many players will not be in Australia during January. Well, they probably will be, TJ, in 2021. And it's a window of opportunity in the international calendar where Australian players are more likely to be in Australia. I know that means some other people might be overseas, but again, we're trying to link it up with selection for national teams and BWF competition. There's also a question about under 17s and combining with New Zealand. Will this still happen? So New Zealand will be very welcome to come and attend the national championships in all the age groups. And I'll explain a little bit more about how that might work in a moment. I think I've answered everyone's questions there, so we might move on and then we'll take any further questions towards the event. So now we're going to towards the end of the presentation. So now we will just move on and talk about the different event formats. And again, went through quite a lengthy process around what the best format might be. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if I put 10 badminton people in a room, I'll have 12 different opinions about what the best format is. So we've really worked hard to try and take everyone's input and feedback and get the best, be able to make the best possible decision and make the best possible recommendation that we can. So here are some insights that we gained around format. So when we talk about format, what we're really talking about is how many ties, how many matches, how many days does the event go for, and thinking about teams and individual event championships and how they might combine together across the different age groups. So certainly the insights we've gained is open and under 19, that there'd be a greater emphasis on performance and winning, whereas under 17s, under 15s, there should be a greater emphasis on development for players, coaches, and officials. So as we move up the age range, we move from development being important for coaches, officials, and players to being about winning as we get to open. So trying to get a good balance that's in the interests of children's health and well-being, and not putting too much pressure on children to be, a national champion when they're 11. How do we make sure we've got a competitive environment while still ensuring that children have a fun and meaningful time? And so not only in terms of the health and well-being, but also thinking about how many days they'll be away from home, for those different age groups, and how many days people might miss school, which I've mentioned before that we want to minimize as much as possible. So in terms of the teams event, the insights we gained from all of the research we did is that the ideal length for teams is around the 3-day mark. That open and under 19 format should align with international formats, which is in line with that thinking that it's about winning. Winning is important. That the under 19, under 17 and under 15 formats should align as best as possible. That the average tie length should be between 6 to 10, and also consideration that we're more likely to get broadcast opportunities if there are maybe 5 ties. A system that categorizes states and territories into A and B for more competitive matches is a key insight. So where states or territories enter a team, for example, a B team or even a C team, or some states that are not quite, are still in the development phase and maybe not as competitive, is that we group states into different groups. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And that also there was a really important push for states and territories to be able to enter B, C, or even regional teams, or a country team is important for development purpose, but that is separate from having national team championships. So what that means is, for example, we don't want a situation where aiming for a situation that Tasmania enters 3 teams and Tasmania comes first, second and third in the national championship division. That's probably something that we want to avoid, and that, we have, Tasmania comes first, and then South Australia is a runner-up runner-up champion or runner-up, and in a 3rd place, rather than having multiple teams. So that essentially means having multiple divisions, potentially an A division, a B division, and a C division, depending on how many teams enter. And then the insights we got for individuals is the ideal length for individuals is 3 to 4 days. Consider the morning of day 3 event for qualification of individuals if needed. I'll talk about that a little bit more about that in a moment. And also there was consideration of maybe individual players could qualify at their state and national events to cater for increased demand in the future. So we're not actually proposing this in the immediate future in the next 2 or 3 years, but maybe something that we think about in 4 or 5 years' time as the numbers of people who participate grow. And also, if people, especially many people traveling long distances in individual events, that they are able to play multiple matches rather than just playing one match and knocked out, is making sure that we have round robin or play matches in terms of the structure. So when we had a look at the number of days, we looked at really 3 key options. So you can see the first one at the top there, which is 3 days for teams event, 4 days for individual event. And then when you throw in travel days, that is 9 days for people to be away from home. The second option there is shortening it down to an event which is 6 days. So that's 2.5 days for, in terms of competition time for teams, 3.5 days or 3 days for individuals, but an extra half a day in case qualifications are required is another option. And then the third option we looked at was 2 days for teams and 3 days for individuals. So we really thought about this, closely and carefully. We try to factor all the things in when we're thinking about what might work best. The longer the event is, the more costly it is for people to attend. The longer the event is, especially for juniors, the longer they are away from home and potentially away from school as well. And there's also the risks to child safety when children are away from home for so long, especially younger children. And but we still want to make sure that there's a meaningful experience and event for everyone who attends. So that was when they're the options we consider around how long the number of days there should be. And we also looked at the number of ties, because this is also important. So we will email this presentation out to you so you have everything in front of you. And if you've got any questions or you want to follow up anything, then you will be able to. So I know this is a lot to take in just in an hour, but we will send this out to you so you've got a bit more time to think about it and provide feedback. But what we've done here is to try and map out the total numbers of ties and total number of matches. So if we take the first column as an example, you can see there that is an international BWF format, one men's singles, one women's singles, mixed doubles, women's doubles, and mixed doubles. So that's 5 ties, 5 matches per tie. We also looked at 6 with a tiebreaker. That's a New Zealand style approach in the way they run some of their national events, where they have six matches in a tie, then a 1 set tiebreaker, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you can see how that flows through to the number of matches per tie. And I think at the moment we have one age group. Don't quote me on which one it is, because I've been working at Badminton Australia for nearly 2 years, but we haven't run an event in my time here. But I think there's one event or one age group we have that has 16 matches per tie, which we just felt was way too many, and the working group felt was too many. And certainly the feedback we got from people was that was too many. So so you can see the options there. So there are positives and negatives to having a smaller number of ties compared to a smaller number of matches compared to a bigger number of matches. So the advantages of having a smaller number of matches, it is more broadcast and media friendly. So if we want to get broadcast, and we've had some interest from some of the streaming services, pay TV, but also free to air around broadcasting badminton in the future. So they want shorter number of matches to fit within their broadcast time constraints. It aligns, another positive for a smaller number of matches, aligns with international competition. We also, a smaller number of ties means, a smaller number of matches means a larger number of states can participate in the different age group championships. Obviously, with more athletes, it's more difficult to enter a team, but a smaller number of team members means more states can enter. It's faster ties. There's less incidence of injury. It reduces fatigue on the players and is more performance focused. But a negative to that is that there is a reduced participation element because the teams are smaller. And the positives when we're looking at a larger number of matches is that there are more matches for players to play. There's more players will be involved in the A team for each state. Reward states with more depth of players. It's more development focused because you have more players that can play in an A team. The negatives are there is a greater risk of repeat state winners, and we see that at the moment with some states winning multiple championships in a row because they are stronger and have a deeper pool of players to draw on. And there is longer game time for better players. So a better player might, instead of playing one match, they might end up playing 2 or 3, depending on how many ties. So then we also had a look at what would be the ideal team sizes. So you can see this at the bottom. If we had 5, the minimum number of players required for 5 is 2 and 2. That doesn't allow for any injuries. So the ideal number is 3 men and 3 women, meaning a team of between a minimum team size of 6 allows for injuries, and then a maximum team size of 8. So that would be 6 to 8, but potentially a team could be up to 10 players as well. So 6 with a tiebreaker. You can see the matches there. The addition of the mixed event, you can have the same numbers of players, and we get up to 7. So 7, you have 3 mixed matches. Probably starts to the balance of matches starts to change a little bit when we've got 5 doubles and only 2 singles. But you can see there the minimum maximum number of players as well. And then this is important for what I'm going to bring up shortly is 8 with a tiebreaker, which has a good balance of matches. You can still have minimal team sizes of 3 men, 3 women, still allows for an injury, and it means more states are able to enter teams. And you can see that works up, the numbers work right up to 12. All right, so that's we took all that information, both the number of ties and also the number of days, and then we tried to come up with what is the best outcome in terms of what the matches should look like. Remembering what I'm about to show you is draft. We're looking for feedback, any questions, so that we can any gaps we might have missed. So in terms of individuals, what we'd like to do is individuals to be 3 days and allow an extra half a day if qualifications are required and we can't fit everything into 3 days. So that would be if a huge number of people entered, we had the qualification event, the event would go for 3.5 days. And what we're saying is where there are more than 32 entries, a plate will also be played across open 19s, 17s and 15s. So that means people get multiple matches. They won't just get 1 match and get knocked out, but they'll have an opportunity to play at least 1 more match by being part of a plate. So it's open 19s, under 17s, under 15s. Open players can choose to opt out of competing if they want in a plate. Sometimes they want to do that because of performance related reasons, but in under 19s, 17s and 15s, that is more participation, more development focused, where the expectation will be that players play in the plate if they get knocked out in the first round. Where there is less than 32 entries, that we will have time and we will have a round robin in either groups of 3 or 4. And whether the round robin is groups of 3 or 4 will be at the discretion of Badminton Australia together with the referee. So that way players will get to play multiple events if there's 32 entries or less in a particular category. So that's individuals. So recommendations for teams. So teams event to be 2.5 days, except for under 15s, that will be a 2-day event. Again, the reason we're under 15s 2-day event for child health and wellbeing reasons. We will have multiple divisions. So Division 1 and Division 2, and potentially additional divisions if there are enough, if states enter enough teams. Division 1, I'll probably repeat this a couple of times to you just so you make sure, because this is an important principle. Only 1 team from every state will be entered to Division 1, and Division 1 will be the national championships. And so they'll be across all the different age groups. remembering that only the A team from every state will be eligible for Division 1. But Division 2 and 3 and New Zealand teams will be able to enter the other divisions. If New Zealand wants to bring over a team, they won't be able to enter Division 1 because that is an Australian national championships across all the age groups. But if New Zealand wants to come over for their development purposes, we'll let them participate in Division 2 or Division 3 if we get enough teams. If New South Wales, for example, wants to have a team, they can have an A team with their best country and city players in the A team. New South Wales might say, from a development point of view, we want to also select a team from country New South Wales. So if they entered that team as a B team, for example, they would go into Division 2. Okay, so I might come to questions at the end because I might answer some of your questions as we go through. So the way that we will set up open under 19s and under 17s, which remember is a 2.5 day competition, and what where we're getting to is that if in a perfect situation, every state and territory enters a team, we will have 8 teams, 2 groups of 4, round robin, so everyone plays 3 matches each. Then we'll have crossover finals, first versus second from each of the groups. We'll play off in the semi-final and there'll be a final. We'll also have matches for teams who finish in the group 3rd and 4th. We'll have crossover matches and work out who finishes 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th as well. But in terms of working out who will be the national championship in open, under 19 and under 17 across 2.5 days, 8 teams in the perfect world, 2 groups of 4 with crossover semi-finals. So I think most people on the call at the moment understands 2 groups of 4 and crossover. Semi-finals. We have this all documented in a very detailed document that we will send out to you all after this meeting, after this forum as well. So you can really see the detail of how the finals and the different round robin groups will work. Okay, where we've got 7, that'll be 1 group of 4, 1 group of 3. Again, the same as the 8 teams, there'll be crossover semi-finals, and then the lower level teams will play in ties to determine the final standings of teams as well. If there's 6 teams, that will be 2 groups of 3, round robin, with a quarterfinal, 2 versus 3, crossover quarterfinals, then a semi-final, and then a final. So some teams will play in this model, some teams will play 5 matches, some teams will play 5 ties, some teams will play 4 ties. 5 teams, if there's 5 teams entered in the division, it will be 1 group of 5, round robin, and then a straight final, first versus second. That's in a 2.5 day competition. If there's 4 teams, it'll be 1 group of 4, round robin, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and then a final. So again, with teams of 4, everyone will get to play 5 ties. If there are 3 or less teams, so we only have 3 states who enter the team championships, then there will not be a national championships for that age group. However, we still may run a competition for a development point of view. If there are also enough B and C teams, we have more than 3 teams, we will still run a competition. It just won't be an official national championships. Keep going, under 15. So remember, under 15s, we're saying will only be 2 days. So the differences in the under 15 2-day event is if there are 8, 7, and 4 teams in a group, so that would be 2 groups of 4, or it'd be in the 7-team format, it would be a group of 4, a group of 3, or in the 4-team format, there will be just 4 teams. There will be finals only, no semi-final. So if there's 8 teams, every team will play 3 ties, and then there'll be the top 2 teams will play against each other for the final. If there's 4 teams, every team will play each other once, and then the top 2 teams will play each other in the final. If there are 6 teams, there'll be a semi-final and a final, but no quarterfinal. If there are 5 teams, we only have enough time to play round robin only, and we will try and structure the draw so the top 2 seeded teams from the year before will play each other in the final in the final round. So it effectively becomes a final, but it will be only round robin. Whoever finishes on top of the ladder will be the winners. So that's how under 15s will work, is proposed to work for 2 days. So you remember this chart that I showed you before that shows the positives, strengths and weaknesses of having a small number of matches per tie versus a large number of matches per tie, and the team sizes. So remember, we went through that before. So tie length. So for open and under 19, with the insights that we gained, is 5 matches per tie and team sizes of 6 to 10. So 3 male, 3 female, or 5 male and 5 female. So that allows for if a state enters 3 males and 3 females, it allows, if someone gets injured, it still ensures that there's enough players to be able to see out the tie. For under 17s and 15s, remembering more development focused rather than performance focused, it's 8 matches plus a tiebreaker. I'm not going to go into the tiebreaker right now, but our friends from New Zealand, including TJ from Victoria, have a good system in place where the tiebreaker is needed to do that in a fun and exciting way that really adds to the atmosphere of the event. So we haven't gone into the detail here about how the tiebreaker would work, but essentially it would be one of the either mixed singles, men's singles, women's singles, mixed doubles, women's doubles. Men's doubles would choose one of those, a process to go through to choose one of those, and one set to then determine the tiebreaker and then who the winner of that tie would be. And the size of those teams would be 6 to 12. So we're keeping again at 6, so enabling smaller states and territories to be able to enter teams into under 17s and 15s. And states can enter a maximum 4 teams across the different divisions if they like. So a couple of just sort of sub rules that we're looking at that we're keen for people to also provide feedback on. But where a player, for example, so if there's 3 and 3, if a team suffers injuries prior to play or during play, they need a doctor's certificate. Teams can then promote someone from their B team into their A team, one person from their B team into their A team, but that person won't be able to play any more matches in the B team. And the injured player is not able to return for the remainder of the competition. So that just allows a backup for players to be able to come into the A team if there are injuries. The other thing we're looking at is players can't play more than 2 matches per tie. However, maybe an exception where there's a doctor's certificate, if there is an injury, that allows that state to be able to play out the tie. But only where there's a doctor's certificate. So just a couple of examples, maybe at the smaller, some of those sub rules that we need to think about when we put into the bylaws. And then finally, for states and territories that are in development phase, so what we mean is maybe they're not quite as competitive. They don't want to go into the A division because they feel like their players aren't ready, that they can request. So it's a request only, but they can request to go into Division 2 or 3 if that's where they feel like their players might be better in terms of their phase of development. So that's the end of what we want to present to you today. We'll go through next steps in a moment, but I might just quickly throw back to Andrew. Andrew, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go to the questions?
Not really, I don't think, Jamie. I think guess the whole process has been interesting in terms of we've tried to make the right decisions based on the right reasons, really. So I think part of the next steps is to get any further feedback, but I think we've tried to be very open throughout the process to make sure we've got the best interests and the best inputs. So hopefully what people can see makes sense and has some logic to it, and it's based on those principles and criteria we put down at the start. So I think that's it. There's another couple of questions there, Jamie. I don't know if you want to pick up on those.
Yeah. TJ has done a good job of making sure I mention his name as many times as possible, because he just picked out a typo. So thanks for that, TJ. And just a question here is just wondering if the mixed doubles, the one most participant wanted to all national events. Not sure if I quite understand the wording there, but there is mixed doubles across all of the team events, as well as there is mixed doubles in the individual championships as well. And TJ, again, in an 8-match format, will players still only be able to play in a maximum of 2 matches per tie? You would need more than a minimum of 3 players if that is the case. So yeah, you're right, TJ. We'll want to make sure that when we do make the, when we're writing up the bylaws, that we're making sure, ideally we want players to stick to playing 2 matches, because that means if they're playing 2 sessions in a day, they'd be playing 4 matches. And to play more than 4 matches in a day, so potentially 6 matches and then 6 matches the next day in a team event, and then potentially finals, is probably too much. And I know it is up to states to be able to manage their teams effectively, manage the health and well-being of their athletes. But we also want to make sure from a rules point of view that we're keeping in mind the health and well-being of athletes as well. So we will definitely, TJ, look at that in a bit more detail as well. Might just hold it there, and if anybody wants to write in any further questions, we just got another one. The best format is 2 of each 10 games and not 3 singles, as the chart says. So I think we're talking about what we've presented here is 5 matches for Open and under 19 to align with international competition, and 8 matches per tie for 15s and 17s. And then the reason, part of the reason we're having those numbers for Open is to get Open 19 is to get more opportunities for broadcast and media coverage, is one strong reason. A reason why having more than that for 17s and 15s is because it is more development focused. We want more players playing in across more games, but also getting the balance right to allow states with smaller numbers of players to be able to enter a team. Another question is, what if there's a scenario of 7 states and 2 territories, so total in 9 teams, being able to play in the Division 1 grade, I think that means. What's the plan? So if we, so this is part of the challenge, Ty, is that we don't know how many teams are going to enter. We don't know how many teams are going to, how many states are going to enter B teams and C teams. We know from past history how many team states may enter. And it's probably likely if we had 7 states, Ty, who entered, probably one of those states may say they're in development phase and they prefer, or they might be happy to go into a Division 2. So in your scenario of 7 states and 2 territories, remembering we've only got 6 states and 2 territories in Australia. So if there were 6 states and 2 territories, we would have 8 teams, so that would work perfectly. But if we had an extra like B team and there were therefore 9 teams, we would just work with the states and territories to maybe work out where they might fit the best. All right, well, just give everyone a couple more moments if there's any other questions that you'd like to ask before we get into next steps. But just remind everyone that this presentation is being recorded, so we will make it available for you to watch again. And we will also send out this presentation, and we will also send out Lopo, actually, who's on the call today, has done up a great chart around the groups and semi-final, quarterfinals, semi-finals and finals, and how that all works, that you will be able to go through in detail and see how it all works. Lopo's done a great job with that to make that quite clear. All right, we might just move on to next steps from here. So as I've mentioned a few times, we're going to take any feedback and refine this further. We will send the presentation to you, and then the final set of information will go to the working group to make final recommendations to the BA board. And then from there, bylaws will be finalised. It will be drafted up, sent out to the bylaws when it's actually written in how it's all codified, will be then sent out to states for final feedback. And then the bylaws will be announced to the community. So I'll just stop sharing. You'll just see Andrew's big head and my big head at the moment. But we might just give it a couple more moments if there's any further queries or questions that people might want to ask. All right, we might finish up from there. Thanks very much, everyone, for your patience. I know it's not the ideal, having these sort of meetings through Zoom is not the ideal way to do things. We have had a lot of people on the call. I think we've had 35 different people come and go on the call. So trying to run it as a meeting with potentially 35 and potentially we were going to have more than 50 people was going to be a little bit difficult. So we thought just doing it in this webinar format and using the chat function would work the best. So I really appreciate everyone's questions. Please go away and think about this stuff some more, and please send those questions through to us or feedback or further information if we haven't thought about it, so that we can keep refining this and developing it till we've got it to the point that we're all as happy as possible as we can, from a collective consensus-based view about what is in the best interest of our sport and our players and our coaches and our officials heading into the future. But Andrew, is there anything that you would like to finish up on?
I think just thanks, as you've said, Jamie, to everyone for their time throughout the process. It's been going for a number of months, and there's been some great input from lots of you and lots of different sources. You mentioned Lopo there, who's been invaluable in terms of knowledge and feedback and thoughts into the process. We certainly have been trying to be as open as possible and recognise where we need information and expertise from people. So thanks to everyone who's contributed, and thanks everyone for your time today. So, and thank you, Jamie.
No worries. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming in. I was just answering a question on the chat about New Zealand, so you can read my answer there about New Zealand's participation, which we would love. Can't enter Division 1, but can enter Divisions 2 and 3. All right, thanks so much, everyone. We really appreciate your time. Stay safe, and we look forward to staying in touch.